In this lecture, we'll see how to implement menu buttons in Unity. So let's go right to Unity and get to work. Here's the very simple Unity project that we'll use to demonstrate menu buttons. Over here in the project window, you can see that I've imported a couple of different sprites that we'll use. And I also have a speak button listener script that will actually be a listener for the event that's invoked by menu buttons in Unity. The script itself is pretty simple, as you can see. All it will do is handle the on-click event, which is the event we'll get from our button. And when it does, it will say, "Hi, I've been clicked." Okay, so to create the menu button, here in the hierarchy window, I'm going to right-click and I'm going to select UI, Image. Over here in the inspector, we can see that the image doesn't have an image for it, so we need to add a sprite, and I will start by using the Speak Menu Button sprite. So I'll just drag that over. And now we have the image. I'm going to need to place it in the scene so we can actually see it. So I will fix X and Y appropriately. And you'll notice here in the game view that that sprite looks strange. And you don't know what the original sprite looks like, but I'm here to tell you that is not what it looks like. So this is fairly common. What we do is go back to the inspector. And here in the image component, we click Set Native Size. And as you can see back in the game window, that looks much better. Now, at this point, this game object, this image, is just an image. It doesn't do anything. It's not a user interface component. So we need to add the button UI component to it. So in the inspector, we add component. And we need to scroll down to get to UI. And then we select UI. And I'm going to make this one a button. We can see that this button component has a number of values that we can adjust. So I'm going to do a couple of things. First, I'm going to change the highlighted color. So I will click on this. And over here on the left, I can pick what color I want to tint the button when the player hovers over it with the mouse. So I will pick some color that will really darken down the button, which is exactly opposite of what we usually do, but that's what I'll pick for now. And as you can see over here in the inspector, it changed to be very dark. So now when I run the game, when I hover over the button, it darkens down and it lightens up when I come off the button. So it's a way to indicate to the player that they've hovered over the button. The other thing that's important over here in this button component is the on-click list of listeners. So down here on the bottom is the list of listeners for the on-click event for the button. We actually need to add that script to the main camera or to some other game object in our scene. Typically, you might have that attached to a menu object so that the menu handles the clicking on all the buttons in the menu. But for this demonstration, for a simple menu button, we'll just attach it to the main camera. We now can add that listener for the on-click event. And you'll notice that for the menu buttons, we're not doing this through code like we did with our event listeners in the previous module. We're actually doing it here in the editor. And that's fine. That's a reasonable place to hook the buttons up to the actions that occur. So for this list of listeners for the on-click event for the button, I'm going to come over here to the right and click plus. And that lets me add a function, a method, remember. Now I'm going to pick an object. And I'm going to pick the main camera because that's where I've attached my listener script. And now that I've picked the main camera, I can now pick a function. And I get to pick from all the components attached to the main camera. I'm going to pick a method in the speak button listener. And of course, I'm going to pick the handle on click event. So the handle on click event method in the speak button listener script that's attached to the main camera is now registered as a listener for the on click event on the button. So now when I run the game and I click the button, over here in the console window, it says, "Hi, I've been clicked." And it did it again because I clicked it again, and so on. Now, it might be the case that we would prefer nicer button behavior so that it actually changes the sprite when I hover and leave the button instead of using color tint. To do that, we're going to use the other sprite I imported into the project, the Speak Menu Button strip. So I'm going to select that. And over in the inspector, in sprite mode, I'm going to change single to multiple because there are multiple images in this sprite that I've provided. That means I need to tell Unity which images are which. So I go over here and I click the Sprite Editor button. And I say, yes, save the changes I just made. And here's my sprite editor. I'm going to slice the strip. I'm going to change this automatic to grid by cell count. And I know I have 2 columns and 1 row. So I will say slice and apply, and I'll close the sprite editor. So now you can see over in the project window, I actually have 2 sprites. I have the dark sprite that was to the left, and I have the light sprite that was to the right. So if I select my image and I come over to the button again, I can change the transition to be sprite swap. Now you'll notice the source image is the image, so I need to change the source image to be my first menu button image. And as you can see, that changed in the game view. And I will change the highlighted sprite to be my second sprite. So now when I run the game, when I hover over the button, I get the highlighted sprite, and when I move off, I get the unhighlighted sprite. And I've clicked it and I go to the console window. So it's the same behavior. It's just different highlighting, changing the sprite. And that's much nicer in terms of how it looks rather than just color tinting. And that's really all there is to creating menu buttons and adding listeners for their on-click event to do whatever processing we want to do. To recap, in this lecture, we learned how to implement simple menu button behavior in Unity, and we also learned how to change the default color tinting on mouse over to changing the sprite that's used for the button instead when the mouse goes over the button.